I just had this overwhelming feeling of just record this, just talk about this because I feel, and I don't say this to scare anybody, but I feel like there's going to be a lot of people who are going to be in my shoes sooner than later.
Hello, my loves. This is Johanna Burkhardt. I am a multidimensional channel, teacher, healer, and author. And I am obsessed with all things metaphysical, esoteric, galactic, and of course, the healing journey. And I'm here to share my stories, my wisdom, and my teachings about being human in the illusion that we call reality. Welcome to Cosmic Blonde.
Hello, my loves. This is a very challenging episode for me to record because it requires me to be super transparent and very vulnerable. And these are not new things to me. If you've been following me for any length of time, you will know that I am a super transparent person. And some would say to a fault because I literally just tell the truth. And I share my journey, the good, the bad, the weird. I share it all. That's part of becoming the change. Being the change is literally sharing your story, your truth, your transformation, right? It's being the change. In order for me to be the change, I have to show you what I'm changing. I have to show you what I'm going through. And I usually do that once I have made it to the other side. And while this current thing, I am not on the other side of it. It's not completely new. I have shared bits and pieces of this story. And it has a lot to do with uncertainty, learning to trust yourself, learning to have faith, believing in yourself, all of these things. But now that I'm towards the end of it and I feel this massive shift coming for me, and this energy just kind of came over me after I literally just finished recording another podcast with a guest. And I was drinking a smoothie and I was taking a little bit of a rest and I was contemplating some things, and I just had this overwhelming feeling of just record this, just talk about this because I feel, and I don't say this to scare anybody, but I feel like there's going to be a lot of people who are going to be in my shoes sooner than later. And I find that if there is a lighthouse amongst the storm that's guiding you towards hope that it will get better, that it's not necessarily your fault, and kind of giving you a direction to go in, that is our saving grace. I am motivated by hope, by hope. And when I have feelings or moments of hopelessness, that is when I struggle the most. And I've learned to ask for help. I have learned over the years techniques and things to do to pull myself out of it when I'm in the thick of it. But as someone who has made it her mission to be the change and who has made it her mission to be that guiding lighthouse for others, and have been somebody who has continuously, time and time and time again, gone through things before the collective goes through them, I know that this is not going to be any different. And I feel that people will find this episode or listen to this episode or resonate with this episode when they need to. And so I want to just have it out there. So as many of you know, I've been a nomad for 2 years, and I've lived in a state of uncertainty, and I've had to live on faith. But it always surprises me when people think that I have it all figured out and that I make 5 or 6 figures a month and, that my business is super successful because it's been around for like 8 years. And even though it's gone through death and rebirth, I've like literally legally closed the business and reopened a new one by, on a legal aspect, just because, it's longevity and I've been doing this for so long, people assume that I'm super successful. And success is individual to each person and what success means to them. And so the part that I want to share that I really haven't fully shared is kind of the story about how all of this came about. So around the time that I published Holy Grail, so this is November of 2021. And actually, if I back it up even before then, it was at the beginning of October, because at the mid to end of October, I was flown in to the Detroit suburb area for a client to facilitate a group event. And I actually had my best friend Tanya Lee from Harmonia Tarot. I had asked for her to be brought in as well. She drove because she got, she lives in Michigan. So the client flew me in. Tanya drove and met me, and they put us up in a hotel for a week. And that whole week, the client pampered me, yada, 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 ahead of the event. It was a whole thing, right? But right before that happened, right before I was preparing to leave to spend 2 weeks, because there was a week after we were actually supposed to go to Salem. And then this big storm hit and that didn't work out. So we ended up staying in Michigan for an extra week. That's neither here nor there, but my brain went there. So anyway, right before that, what I used to do, and some of you might remember from my Instagram stories, is I love to ride my bike down to the water from my place. And it was something that I did anytime it was sunny or not raining and not freezing. And I would go down there every day and I would ride my bike. I'd get off my bike, walk down to the docks and just stand at the water and experience the beauty that is nature, the sun sparkling off the water, just feeling the breeze. And one of those days I was standing there and I heard in my mind's, in my head, I heard, "You're going to miss this." Oh, I'm going to get a little choked up. I knew in that moment that I was moving or that things were changing, but I didn't know yet where I was going or what that was doing. I hadn't even considered moving, other than the only thing that was continuously coming up was Texas. I would see Texas license plates, things on TV would be Texas. I would hear people talk about Texas, Texas on social media. Like everywhere I went, it was Texas, Texas, Texas. So I knew at some point I was either going to be visiting Texas or moving to Texas. And it was kind of like a running joke. And I think the only person that ever even really knew about that was Tanya. And I knew the moment I heard that in my head that this was going to happen, because it's the same exact way I heard it. And I knew it was my guides talking to me, because it came in the same exact way as a few months before I asked my husband for a divorce. I heard the same exact thing. I was sitting on my screen room porch, drinking my coffee and looking at the back field and just enjoying the birds, and I heard it. And so it came in the same way. And I'm thinking, oh my God, what's happening? I had also heard Costa Rica very clearly from my team during a meditation. So I was like, oh, I wonder what's going to happen. I really was in a state of curiosity. I was not in a state of fear. And so I go to Michigan, have the event. Tanya and I just cruise around and explore Michigan for a week after that. I fly home, have the book launch. 11/11/21. I launched the book. It literally was within weeks of that book launch. By the end of November, I started to notice that financially things were not the same. I was starting to not bring in the amount of money that I had been bringing in. I mean, my business was fully supporting me on my own. I paid all my bills. I got my nails done. I got a massage every month. I had extra funds. It's not like I was living client to client. My business has been successful and supportive of me for a very long time. And I noticed that and I was like, okay, things like that happen. And I have never been one to believe, and nor will I ever, that come holiday time, that my business is going to be less than. I think that that is a belief that at the holidays, people aren't paying into spiritual development or healing or doing any of that type of work. I have had some big clients sign in the month of December. So that's not anywhere I even went. It was just this notice of my funds, like my money is getting low and I'm not calling in clients the way the clients aren't coming in the way that they were before. And it continued into December. And December was a rough month for me. It's obviously Christmas. I started to struggle. And by January and February and March, I was having to ask charities to help me pay my rent and to pay my utility bills. And the little bit of money that was coming in was covering my business expenses, my food, those types of things. That is a very humbling, humbling experience to have to go ask charities to pay your rent when you are in your 40s and you have owned this business for this amount of years. It was humbling. I can't say that enough. I am not a person who has ever been good at asking for help. And my whole life, I have been the one who has taken care of myself in addition to everybody else. And so here I was for the first time in my life, living on my own without my children, without having to take care of a man or a bunch of animals. And it was just me and my business. And I was healing my adrenal fatigue. So I was working less than I had ever worked before and making more than I had ever made before. And then it was like in one moment, it was all gone. And I had no idea why. If anything, my frequency was higher. If anything, things were better. I had launched my book. I had released all the fear of putting it out into the world. I had stepped into my power. And it all changed overnight, like a second. It was gone. And I had no choice but to let go of my apartment and to become a nomad. And I think that's where a lot of people don't know. I think a lot of people think I chose to become a nomad. I didn't have anywhere to go. Originally, my mom has a guest house behind her home. And originally, I was going to go there. And that way, I would not have to pay overhead, right? Rent, all of those things. And at the last moment, she bailed out. Her and I have always had a tumultuous relationship ever since we reconnected when I was 16, after her leaving when I was 3. It's never been the mother-daughter relationship that I have sought out or craved. And so I was actually looking very much forward to that, living there, because I had flown out there a couple of times and spent 3 weeks each time, like trying to rebuild that connection and getting to know her and understanding her so I could understand why she was the way that she was. And then to have her do that was like a slap in the face. And then I didn't know what I was going to do. So then I had this other friend who had two homes, and her daughter was supposed to be moving out of her home in Georgia. And she said, well, why don't you come stay with me for a few months? She was going to be using that time, and what she had said to me, to get it ready to sell, or, just taking care of things that needed to be done that didn't get done while her daughter was there. And I was like, oh, that's perfect because I keep being called to Texas. So I can stay there for a few months. I can kind of get my bearings, and then I can go to Texas. So here I am, a couple of weeks out of leaving, maybe, maybe 3, 4 weeks of leaving. And I message her. I don't hear anything. She literally ghosts me, literally ghosts me. This is somebody who I was pretty close to, and it was very painful for me for someone to be that way and not just communicate and say, hey, things have changed. I'm so sorry. She just ghosted me, and it ruined our friendship. We haven't spoken together since. So I've sold most of my stuff, put the rest in storage, and I move out of my apartment, and I spend about a week or so at my old home, the one that I gave my ex-husband, with my kids, just spending time with them before I leave. Still have no idea where I'm going or what I'm doing. Ended up going to Tanya's in Michigan and just had 3 suitcases and a box and my bedding, like my pillows, blankets, things like that, that I wanted to have with me, and hit the road for Michigan. And my intention was to be here for about a month or so, uh, you know, basically 4 to 6 weeks, just to kind of take a breath, let everything settle, because I had just let go of everything, which was hard enough on its own because in 2020, I walked away from a marriage. I walked away from my home and all the money that I put into that home, because that home we built together, like we built that home. And all of my inheritance went into that home. And my kids were there, and my dogs were there, and my cats were there. And like I literally took my desk and my clothes pretty much and walked out the door and just let go of everything, gave him everything. I was in such burnout from having adrenal fatigue that I didn't want to fight. I didn't want to go to court. I couldn't. I had to choose me. And unfortunately, choosing me meant walking away from everything, including my marriage. And he wasn't abusive. He didn't cheat. He didn't do anything technically wrong. We just really grew apart. He wasn't one to grow. He wasn't one to evolve. And when I married him, I married him for his potential and then kept him to that standard. And he was never going to reach that. That was unfair. And the relationship became very toxic to me. And I was the one trying to uphold the relationship and keep it together. And you can't do that. It broke me, literally. It fucking broke me. So I had to literally walk out the door. And I did get a very small settlement that was enough to refurnish a new apartment to some extent. And it was gone. And here I was, not even 2 full years later, getting rid of everything I had just bought brand new and putting what little of it I was keeping in a storage unit. And I needed time to digest that. I needed time to be like, oh my God, all of this just happened. And I didn't know what was happening for me. And I admittedly went into survival mode because that's just what was happening. I was in survival mode because everything was being taken away from me. And it's really hard when that happens to not blame yourself, to not shame yourself, to not ask yourself, what am I doing wrong? What's wrong with me? Because I didn't stray from my mission. I wasn't doing anything shady or out of integrity. I wasn't doing things just for the money. I was still me. I was still operating from a space of integrity and love and service. And I've said it before and I'll say it to the day I die, most likely. I would, I have, I would and have done this for free. I love it. And while just because we can do it for free, I should say we shouldn't, because I mean, the amount of energy it takes to put this podcast out and the amount of editing work and all the behind the scenes work, all the amount of energy and time it takes people like me to create free content that we want to create. It's not that we have to. We want to. We get channeled messages. We get inspired by our own stories. We feel guided to be that light and share. That is worthy of an energy exchange. That is worthy of being paid for our wisdom, because what we share, what I share when I am with a client and what I share with the world, that wisdom came from blood, sweat, and tears. It came from me walking through a painful fire and taking the words of wisdom, the guidance that I received, and putting it into fucking action and being that change and watching the transformation take place. And that, my friends, is invaluable. So don't ever think that just because we can do it for free, we should, because that's not fair. But at the same time, it needs to be rooted in service and love, first and foremost. And so to think for a moment that I wasn't going to be able to do this, or that I wasn't able to do this because it wasn't supporting me, like it tore me into a bazillion pieces. And I wasn't willing to give it up. I wasn't. So I started to fight like I always do. I'm a fighter. I've said it on other episodes. I'm like the cockroach. I'm gonna survive the apocalypse. I'm going to, because the fight in me is so fucking strong. And that's not a bad thing. It's just learning when to fight and when to surrender. And I wasn't ready to surrender, not in the way that the guides wanted me to. And so I fought, and I created new programs, and I created more content, and I tried harder and I tried harder and I tried to fix it. And while it obviously worked to some extent because I'm here, it really didn't work either, because it's not about fixing it. It's not about changing it. It's about releasing judgment of it, right? That's all that integration is a release of judgment, acceptance, unconditional acceptance. And acceptance is not agreement. It's just, fuck, this is what it is. What is this teaching me? What is this trying to teach me? What is this trying to show me? And back then, especially, I couldn't have answered that question. I absolutely could not have answered that question. I will tell you that it literally built my trust and faith and belief in myself. If there's anyone who believes in themselves or trusts themselves or has faith in themselves, it's me. And while that doesn't mean I still don't have moments of scarcity or I still don't have moments of fear or doubt, that would be asinine. Anyone who tells you they never have doubt is they're lying. They just are. But again, we're allowed to have feelings of doubt while still knowing that we can trust ourselves because it's just a feeling. I mean, I made enough money uh, to keep myself afloat from month to month. I'm not paying overhead, right? I'm not paying rent. From Tanya's, I started house sitting. And so it became an adventure of, well, where do I want to live? Where do I want to plant my roots? To be truthful, I wasn't happy in North Carolina. If I get real honest, within months of arriving to North Carolina to move there after I let go of everything I owned in California, because that was another time I lost it all, right? I walked away from everything I had built and went to the other coast and started all over again. So months after arriving, I knew that I had made the wrong decision. But you don't walk away from everything to turn around and go back. At least that's how I saw it back then. So anyway, it was like, where do I want to plant my roots? Where do I want to live? And I didn't know. And so I signed up for the house sitting app and I found a house sit in Texas. And I had already booked my ayahuasca 3-day retreat experience in Texas. So I drove from Tanya's all the way down to Texas and did ayahuasca and had that amazing experience where I could completely understand and experience viscerally things that I had been channeling for years. Whole other episode and topic. And then just began to move around all over the place and literally was going moment by moment, not knowing what's coming next. And again, still trying to figure out why this faucet that was flowing steadily for so long just shut the fuck off. And what I had done wrong, or just really dissecting it and trying to figure it out. And all while trying to stay in the present moment, having faith, believing in myself, and having to do that work, like really doing the deep work of working on my worthiness and my belief and my trust and my faith in myself every single day. I did the work. And things started to turn back on and start to flow again in 2022, after I left Tanya's, enough to where I could buy a new car because literally I drove into Texas and my transmission went out. I swear to you. It was like the moment I crossed that line, all of a sudden my transmission started to slip. And the car was not the transmission, a new transmission was like $4,000. The car was not worth $4,000. And I'm like, what am I going to do? How am I going to buy a new car? My income hasn't been steady. I have to, show proof, steady income from my business, blah, blah, blah. Like all the stories, all the fear things come up. And I just trusted. And the money came in and I was able to get the loan and I was able to buy the car. And I love my car so much. And things were just ticking right along. And then I would go through these cycles where it would be really sparse and really scarce. And then I would go through these cycles where a little bit of money would come in and I would feel like I have a moment of hope. And I went through these cycles over and over and over again and have been to date. And last year, I mean, I've shared some of this last year. I went back to North Carolina in September for my son's 17th birthday, and I emptied out my storage unit and literally gave away thousands and thousands of dollars in crystals, oracle and tarot decks, crystal lamps, furniture, kitchen, like anything that I had saved, I had to let it go. I couldn't hold the unit anymore. That was painful. That was real painful. And that September was a really hard month for me because I lost my wallet. I had issues with my bank card. So even when I had the money, I couldn't pay my bills and I had to ask for help and had to pay people back once my cards were all turned back on. The bank had to send me new cards and then they would send it to the wrong address. And it was like, it was one thing after another continuously, continuously. I kept having all of these things. I closed my business legally. I shut it down with the IRS. I closed the EIN number. I said, I just have to put this to bed. I've really literally felt like I just have to shut everything down. So I closed my business. I closed my courses. I said, I'm not going to run these live anymore. So I'm going to archive them. You know, people can still buy them, but I'm not going to run them live anymore. I put everything on sale, did like a fire sale kind of thing, out of business sale, closed my business with the EIN or closed the EIN with the IRS and just took about a month and a half where I didn't do any business work. I didn't. I mean, I still posted from time to time, but I just shut it all off and shut it all down. And I needed to take that reset. And I came back to San Diego and gave it some time. And then I restarted my business. I got really clear on what it was that I wanted to focus on. I changed my branding colors. I really changed the energy around it. And I said, I'm going to do the things that I love to do. And they're either going to support me or they're not. And that's when I opened Cosmic Blonde. And I went back to basics of just doing sessions and readings and private mentorship and said, we're not going to create any more courses. We're not going to do, we're not going to do memberships anymore. We're not going to do any of these things. We're going to go back to just the basics of being who I am, talking and sharing my story on my podcast, possibly bringing guests on from time to time, really getting clear on what I wanted to do because my vision had changed. And as we collapse timelines, as we go through death and rebirth, as we grow and change and evolve as a person, those dreams and those visions that we've had for so long, they can change and often do change. And so I had to grieve letting go of some of those things. And not like they can't come back, but I just had to let them go. And I had to get really clear on what I wanted to do moving forward. And what I really wanted to focus on were things that actually lit me up completely. And so that's what I did. And so even today, as I record this, my circumstances are not better, but I'm better. And I have absolute clarity. And I knew what I'm about to say, I knew probably a year ago, if not more than that. But I knew that what I was going through with the financial hardship and everything kind of losing everything again, I knew from the pattern, this is something that the collective is going to go through. We're going to see massive amounts of people go through loss, whether it's physical loss of a loved one, physical loss of their marriage, like walking away. There's going to be people who just walk away from their marriages. And they probably, some of them already who I've had sessions with tell me, like, I have so much guilt and shame because he didn't cheat, he didn't do anything wrong. Loss of jobs with mass layoffs, people having money losses. There's going to be a lot of loss this year, which is going to be the catalyst for a year of deep transformation, which is really what 2024 is about anyway. It's a year of deep, deep transformation. It's a year of massive rebirth. It's the year of the rise of the light worker. And so I started going into communities of people who are like-minded, who are out here channeling, who are out here doing this work this way. And I started to discover there's so many more people like me that are going through this right now and who are feeling the same way. What's the problem? What am I doing wrong? Why is this happening? Because there's no logical reason for it. I've tried to fix it. I even went as far as trying to go back into the workforce with no luck. No matter what I did, no matter how much I tried to fix it, it wasn't fixable. It wasn't working. And I knew. Because the thing that the guides have said time and time and time and time again is we're trying to get you to surrender, Johanna. And I'm like, I have surrendered. But what they meant was, we want you to release judgment of what's happening. We want you to release the judgment that your circumstances are wrong because you're judging you. You're judging you've been in this business for this long and you should be making this amount of money consistently and you should be already doing X, Y, and Z. And I was judging myself and I was feeling shame that I was not further along and that was even happening to me. Like, how can I be this person who's out here channeling this information? How can I be out there talking about these things when here I am in financial ruin and having to reset my life for the third time? 3 is my number, if you haven't picked that up yet. How can I do this? Like, I had so much shame and that shame needed to come up. I needed to feel that shame so that I could integrate it. And, it's just an emotion. The more you resist it, the more it destroys your life, the more that it destroys your body. And you have to face it. Like, repression is bad news, guys. It's just bad news. And so I was feeling the shame. I was doing the work, but they were right. I was still judging that my circumstances were wrong. And a lot of that came from, and might have even been because, meaning my own judgment was causing other people to judge me, but I was receiving a lot of judgment. My family, one of my own children, was judging me and really having a hard time thinking that I was being lazy or dragging my feet or not doing, she didn't understand. Why aren't you settled by now, Mom? Why aren't you in your own place? Why are you still gallivanting around the country, living your best life? And I can live my best life and still be in shitty circumstances, by the way. In case you need to hear that, your circumstances don't dictate your state of being. They don't. So even if your life is in financial ruin, even if you don't have a home, even if your business is failing, your marriage is failing, what your friendships are failing, it doesn't matter. You can still live your best life. And a lot of the time I had great time. I saw so much beauty in this country and had just meeting up with past clients and acquaintances and people in communities that I've met. I really enjoyed this past 2 years. I really, really 100% did. So two things can be true. You can be struggling and be happy. But my daughter was judging me. My mother was judging me. Other people in my life were judging me. And I started to feel like maybe I am the problem. Maybe I'm not doing enough. And it was because I was allowing their judgment, AKA what they would do if they were in my shoes, dictate what it meant about me. And that's fucking bullshit because they think they know what they would do if they were me, but they're not me. And they haven't lost everything 3 times. And they haven't been through hell and back. And they didn't go through the abuse that I did. They don't, in order to say, if I were you, they would have had to walk in your shoes, all of it, the whole time, because their life and what they went through built their belief system, built their lens of perception, built who they are and how they do things and their trauma responses and their triggers and all of the things. And that's completely different than mine. Our energy, everybody's energy is different. Our signatures are different. The way we operate is different. The way we sleep is different. The things we need to eat are different. Our sensitivity levels are different. Neither of these are better or less than. There's no hierarchy, there's no superiority. It is just fucking different. We're all special, we're all unique in our own ways. So, anybody who says, this is what I would do if I were in your shoes, you have to really take that with a grain of salt because nobody is you and nobody will ever be you. And, something that I really thought after my daughter was upset with me was I wasn't given the opportunity to be sat down at a table for her to hear my story because I've kept my children in the dark about a lot of things. My children don't know a lot. They don't know about a lot of my abuse. They definitely did not know about my sexual abuse. There's a lot of things my kids don't know about my marriage and never will because it's not necessary. They weren't me. They don't need to know those things. But I wasn't given the opportunity to be sat down at a table and say, tell me what made you make these decisions or why things are the way that they are. And so while it didn't break me, because I've been through hell and back, I know hell like the back of my hand. I know rock bottom like the back of my hand. I'm not afraid of rock bottom. I'm not afraid of not having anything. I'm not afraid of not having a home. I don't fear much anymore because I have faced the most survival fears in the face and said, fuck you. I will be okay. I have looked at death in the face and said, I choose to live. I'm not afraid of dying. Dying is peaceful. I am not afraid of death. But I was afraid of letting go of this earthly experience because I love Earth so much. I love it so much. I love nature more than anything. I love to laugh. I love to explore. I love to adventure. I love to road trip. I love music. I love food, even though I don't eat a lot of it anymore. I fear letting go of this, but I don't fear dying. I fear losing life in the physical way. And so I felt like while I survived this, I don't think many others would have, but I want them to. I want them to look at me and say, here was this super successful woman. She's written 3 books. She's been flown in to do speaking events. She has worked with some really top leaders. She has had podcasts. She has put out these amazing courses. She has changed so many people's lives, including her own first and foremost. And then she lost it all for seemingly no reason and spent 2 years walking in faith and trusting and doing the fucking work, all while having a good time, most of the time, all while living her best life. And she is proof that just because the shit hits the fan and we don't always understand why, we know that it's happening for us and that there is a purpose behind it. And that one day that purpose will reveal itself. But we can't seek and receive at the same time. We just can't. So we have to surrender to what is. We have to accept that this is what I'm being dealt. And now it isn't about anything else. It's not about fixing it. It's about how I play my hand. How? Meaning the state of being that I am. Do I want to fucking fight with this shit? Do I want to throw a tantrum? Do I want to get angry? Do I want to cry? Do I want to give up and kill myself? And all of these things I have thought of. It's not that I haven't. But at the end of the day, it was a fucking choice that I made to say, you know what? I don't. And while this is really painful for moments and really hard, tomorrow I may wake up feeling the beauty of the sun and the trees and the scents and the water and the ground beneath my feet and the joy of a smile or a laugh from a baby. We're getting the opportunity to reconnect with someone who I grew up with, who was like a brother back then, who has become a brother again, and being able to be an auntie to his babies and to become close to his wife and to reconnect with my old OG friends in San Diego and to fall in love again and to see this country from the back roads, taking my time, being able to stop every fucking 15 minutes if I wanted to pee or to take a picture or to run and dance in the street, which I did often, by the way, because on the back roads, there's no traffic. Getting stuck behind an Amish buggy, just seeing the beauty and listening to people's stories, meeting locals in random places and hearing their stories of resilience and life. The things that I have learned in this 2 years, this trial by fire that I've gone through to build the foundation of belief and faith and trust in myself is not something everybody else is going to have to go through. But I feel there is a collective of us that have gone through this or are going through this because we will be the ones who will be leading the torch to say, hey, you can do it. You can do it too. Think outside the box, surrender to what is and allow the solution to appear, allow the creativity to flow. Start focusing on your passions again and allow that passion to be the thing that carries you. You see, the most successful businesses are the ones where people love to do the creating. They love to do the speaking. They love to do the session work. They love to do the art. They love to do the herbs. They love to cook, whatever it is for you. They love the act of the creation, of the journey, and the money they make, the success they have is the icing on the cake. It is. Because even me, like my favorite course to facilitate of all time has been the energy matrix. And that was a really big course. I think that course was 8 months. The only other one that was 8 months was the devotion experience that Ashley and I co-created together. And I remember the amount of grief I had once it was done because it was done live. So because it was live, I was in the act of creating as everybody was learning it. And when it was done, it was just like so much grief because it was so beautiful. And I didn't even, at that point, I didn't even care. And it was, what it made or what happened to it from that point on. Because the creation process was over. That's the part that brought me joy. The the PTSD that I have from editing Holy Grail for a year with Tanya and doing all the work to publish it and promote it, I still have a twinge of PTSD from it because that is a gnarly experience, you guys. But the act of writing it itself was so healing. And the year of fear that I had to work through in order to even get to the end of the book to be ready to publish it, that was a journey on its own too. And the book that I'm writing right now, I'm writing it from the space of this writing process is going to heal me at a deeper level. And then I'm going to put it out into the world, and whatever happens with it, happens with it. And I have that mindset now because I didn't with Holy Grail. The process of Holy Grail was super healing, but I had an expectation about how well it was going to do. And that bubble got burst real fast. So I don't really have a point to this episode. I don't. I just felt called to come on and just be rawer than I think I've ever been before and let people into where I am. And you can see that the success is not defined for me by how much money I make. Because I've made a lot of money in my life. In fact, making a lot of money has always been something that had generally come very easy for me. I have owned a brick and mortar insurance agency. I have always worked in insurance or real estate. I've always moved up to the top in companies very quickly. I've always had a side business. I have been self-made. I built 350 websites at one point. I learned web design on my own and coding. I learned everything that I did on my own. I am self-made. And my success comes from my freedom. to do what I want when I want, to rest when I need to rest, to go hike when I need to go hike, to become a workhorse for days at a time and get lost in the Einstein creation of, how Einstein would or Tesla would just disappear for days and they'd deep into writing or deep into creating, to allow myself to go through those ebbs and flows. To me, that is the ultimate success, is to live life on my terms instead of fucking somebody else's. And one day that profitability, that faucet will turn back on for me. There's no doubt in my mind, because what you give must come back. It's just we have to let go of the expectation of when and how that comes back. So I know that it will. I've seen my future. I've seen those timelines. I would not have those desires. I would not have those visions if there wasn't a time, space, reality that was already true for me within this incarnation. I have seen the timelines of my success, of me being a New York Times bestseller, of me standing on the stage, of my show being on iHeartRadio. And it already is technically on iHeartRadio as a podcast, but I want to have a live show. I want to be a different part of iHeartRadio. I want to be like a Howard Stern, but for spirituality and not Howard Stern. I don't know. It's the best way I can describe it. There are things that I want, that I've seen, that I know are possible. And all I have to do is believe and have faith and surrender and say, okay, universe, this is where I am. I don't have to like it, but I need to accept it and I need to make the best of it and not judge it as wrong. And learn to ask for help and to allow myself to receive and allow myself to be supported and to go back to basics and go back to simplicity and know that it's okay. And it doesn't matter what anybody else thinks, because I know what I'm doing is right where I need to be, and that what I'm doing may not make sense to anybody else. And it doesn't have to, because nobody else is me. And who I am becoming in this process is building a level of confidence in me that I never thought I would ever be able to achieve. It's quite beautiful and emotional. So anyway, I hope you gained something from this episode. And if there's somebody in your life who is struggling in any way, shape, or form, and might be in the energy of despair or hopelessness, feel free to send this to them, because it's not for nothing. I didn't go through this for nothing. You're not going through it for nothing. You may not know what it is yet, but if you knew without a shadow of a doubt that you were going to make it through, that you were going to be okay, how do you want to look back and say you handled it? I'm going to leave you with that. And I'll see you in the next episode.
Hey, thanks for listening. This episode was brought to you by JohannaBurkhardt.com, where it's time to defy the limits of your mind and step into your multidimensional mastery. Don't forget to subscribe so that you never miss an episode. See you next time.